After Casey's death, the terror I had been feeling came back full force, and it was joined by something else. A new, ever-present feeling of guilt. In that split second, when the knife had clattered to the pavement, I had made my decision, and I had abandoned Casey to run from my parents. I kept replaying it over and over again in my head. I often wondered what would have happened if I had grabbed the knife and run into the bushes after him. In those daydreams, Casey lived, and he was so grateful to me for saving his life that he gave me some of his favorite toys. Then, reality would crash back in. Casey was dead. I had done nothing. My parents did not believe that I had seen a monster, but they were at least more understanding, as they knew I had seen something that was worthy of the amount of sleep I was losing and the amount of time I spent worrying. They told me I was not allowed to go out at night anymore. The kidnapper had not been found yet. They said they did not want to scare me. They just wanted me to be safe. I was perfectly fine following this new rule. At first. As the months went by, my feelings of guilt worsened. Not only had I done nothing on that night, I continued to do absolutely nothing to stop anything like that from happening again. I knew I'd like to hide in my oleanders at night. How long before some careless kid happened by there again? Shouldn't I do something to prevent it, since I was the only one who knew anything about it? So, as my 11th birthday drew close, I started to make my plan. I suspected that, whatever it was, it did not like to be outside during the day. I had only seen it in the bushes during the night, and I knew it had once spent the entire day in the closed box around the window on the roof. If I could get into a position to watch it before the sun went down, it wouldn't have any idea that I was there. So, I told my parents that I would be going over to a friend's house. I promised that I would have his parents drive me home if it was late. I don't think they suspected I would lie to them about being out at night, considering how jumpy and terrified I was. When I left, not long before sunset, I waited until I saw that the street was clear, and then climbed into a tree that was in the yard of our neighbors across the street. The owners of the property were old, so I hoped they would already be going to bed, or at least that they would have better things to do than to stare out their windows. The leaves on the tree were not very thick, but I hoped that it would be enough to keep me hidden. I settled on a branch that was low enough to the ground that I would probably be okay if I decided to jump off it to get down. I did not have to wait very long for the sun to set, but it seemed to take hours for the ambient light to fade after it had fallen beyond the horizon. My courage wavered dozens of times as the darkness slowly seeped out of its shadowy corners and began to flow over every surface. After an interminable time that seemed to stretch into infinity, it was fully dark. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage as my surroundings became something I could describe as night. I worked hard to control my breathing, but I was well and truly terrified. I could still watch, however, even through the fear, and I was determined to learn anything I could about the creature. The minutes stretched to hours, however, and nothing happened. I saw no sign of it. No pale arms sticking out of the bushes. No audible, raspy breathing. My legs were aching, and I was considering calling my stakeout when I heard a noise from the house behind me. The homeowners were surely asleep by now, right? I turned to look, reconsidering my previous assumptions about the elderly. That's when I saw something that eviscerated me. Something was crawling along their roof, near the edge of it to my left. The only reason I could see it was because I was in the tree. It was skylined against the dim background of the starry sky, keeping low to the roof. From the street it would not have been visible. I slowly pressed my hand over my mouth and continued to watch, frozen. It made its way across the roof to the chimney and crawled into it. I sat there, as still as I possibly could. I could feel my heart thrumming like the beat of a hummingbird's wings. I watched the windows of the house. Sure enough, I saw the curtains shifting in one of them. It was too dark to see anything else, but I felt sure that it was staring out the window. The curtain fell back into place. I waited in the tree, completely still. I saw a quick flash of light coming from inside, briefly making the curtains glow. Still, I waited. A few minutes later, movement from the roof caught my eye. It was crawling back out of the chimney. When it had fully pulled itself out, it sat down next to the chimney on the right side, back leaning against it, and started ripping and tearing into something it had been carrying in its mouth. I felt sick for a moment, until I heard the crinkling of some kind of plastic wrapper, and realized that it must have stolen some food from the kitchen while inside. That had been the little flash of light I had seen. It was checking the fridge. I felt like I had seen enough, and it seemed fairly distracted. I didn't want to be in the tree once it started to search for more food. I inched my way down the tree. It took quite a bit of time to do it quietly. I reached the bottom without causing any loud noises. I didn't calm down at that point, however. I crept down the lawn towards my house, preparing to make a break for it when I got close enough. Just as I was about to hit the sidewalk, I took a deep breath and prepared to run. Then, the motion-sensitive lights above the driveway flicked on. They flooded the whole front yard of the house in light. I froze and turned to look back at the roof. It was staring at me. It was clutching at the edge of the roof, its head hanging down, thrust out toward me. I could see its features in the ambient light. It looked human. Extremely gaunt and pale, but almost childlike. Its dark hair was hanging down on either side of its face. It was grinning at me. I ran from my house without a second thought. As I reached the other side of the road, I heard the sound of bare feet slapping against concrete. It was chasing me. The slapping sounds got closer and closer. By the time I reached my front door, it sounded like they were right behind me. I flew inside and locked the door. I had not seen it behind me in the brief moment before the door slammed shut, but I wasn't going to check if it was there. I slid down to the ground and breathed. I remember laughing as I sat there. I don't know why. I wasn't feeling particularly joyful or funny, but still, I laughed. I must have been out in the tree for hours because the house was dark and quiet. Eventually, I stood up and walked further in. That's when I realized my mistake. It didn't need the front door to enter my house. As I walked into the living room and switched on the light, I saw something hanging down in the fireplace. It was long and dark. I was momentarily confused until it shifted downward, and a pale forehead came into view. Screaming, I ran from my room. I locked the door, turned on the light, and threw myself under the covers on my bed. Then I heard a soft tapping sound at the door. I started to cry, knowing that I was doomed. "Honey, what's wrong? Open the door." It was my mom's voice. I opened the door for her. She explained that they had been waiting up for me in their room and had heard me scream. One look at my face told her how scared I was. She asked me what had frightened me. I told her that it was dark when I came inside, and I had seen something in the fireplace. She sighed, but gathered me up in an embrace and comforted me. After a few minutes, she went off to bed, and I locked the door after she left. Another sleepless night followed. as I imagined what would happen if it came for me in the middle of the night. I abandoned my commitment to do something about the creature as quickly as I had made it. I was more determined than ever to stay out of the living room at night. A few weeks later, on my 11th birthday, my parents got me a Game Boy. They had scrimped and saved for a while to afford it because they knew I had had a hard year. To me, it was a godsend. When my family would go to bed, I would retreat to my room, lock the door, and play in there in relative peace until I fell asleep. I often felt guilty about my lack of action against the creature after it had murdered my friend. But in the face of something that could easily invade my home, or any other that it set its sights on, I was more than happy to back down. During the day, I still tried to be as normal as possible. I still went out to play with my friends, though I always made sure I was home before dark. When we played hide and seek, I still was able to use the oleanders as a hiding spot. But unwanted memories tended to claw their way into my mind if I did so. I ignored these as best I could. I wanted to keep up appearances in front of my friends, so I hid there pretty often. I sometimes tried to drop subtle hints about things I had seen, asking my friends about their scariest experiences, and telling them about the raspy breathing I had heard by the oleanders. I wanted to know if anyone else had any experience with the thing that had killed Casey, but it seemed that none of them had ever encountered it. Maybe it spent most of its time near my house. I was not sure. Since I was trying to seem normal, that included me joining my friends in some of their dumber decisions, like the time we explored the abandoned house. It was Casey's house, next door to me. It had only been empty for around 6 months since Casey's mom had left, and she had not yet put it up for sale. That was good enough for terming it an abandoned house. And to my friends, that made it dangerous, scary, and above all, exciting. I wasn't too thrilled about breaking into the old home of my friend, and I was even less so when the others started talking about breaking in at night. I tried to suggest that it probably wasn't a good idea. They all started to question why I was so scared. They explained that during the day would probably be too noticeable. I at least managed to convince them that near sunset was probably late enough in our quiet neighborhood for us to escape notice. They agreed, and quietly, I hoped that a large group of kids would make it safe. Just in case, I grabbed Casey's knife from where I had hidden it in my room before we went. There were 8 of us in total the evening we decided to do it. We were playing in my backyard. I had told my parents that we were going to another friend's house soon, and that we would leave through the side gate to avoid disturbing them. It was an easy enough lie. We hopped the fence into Casey's backyard near sundown. This required some careful maneuvering through the hedges, which were on our side of the fence here, unlike the ones where Casey had disappeared. When we had all made it over, the unkempt grass and weathered furniture provided enough of that abandoned house atmosphere my friends were looking for. Everyone started to get creeped out, which is what they wanted. Never mind, Casey's backyard had always looked like this. Pretty soon, we all realized that we didn't have a plan for getting inside. One of my friends suggested breaking a window. I disagreed with that plan. I did not want to ruin the house just for some fun. Someone else suggested we try the dog door. It had a plastic screen over it, since it had not been used in so long, but we broke that pretty easily and squeezed inside. The light was getting pretty low, so some of my friends took out the flashlights they had brought. We marveled over the dust and cobwebs. I had rarely seen the interior of the house. My parents had always told me to invite Casey over to our house, but to not go into his if possible. They didn't trust his stepdad. The furniture was sparse, but I couldn't remember if that was how it had always been, or if Casey's mom had already emptied the house of the things that were important to her when she left. We went through the rooms one by one. I don't know exactly what we expected to find, but our exploration became less and less exciting as the minutes wore on. It was soon full dark, which added a bit to the creepiness of the ordeal, but a quick pointing of a flashlight towards any unknown object or creaking of the house quickly dispelled any fear. I think most of my friends were getting bored as we came to the last room in the house. Casey's room. I felt more than a little weird as we approached the bedroom door. I was first in line, and I tried to focus on where I was going as my friends' flashlights ran back and forth across the walls and doors of the hallway. I paused for a moment when I reached the door, a hand on the handle, images of Casey being pulled back into the bushes flashing through my head. As I opened the door, I noticed several things all at once. Each of them was terrifying in their own way. I noticed red and blue lights flashing through the windows facing the front yard. The blinds in the room were down, but it was easy to see the colored light along the edges of each blind. Someone must have noticed the flashlights as they crossed over the windows and lit up the rooms, then called the police. It might have been my parents. I never talked to them about this experience, so I have no idea. There had not been any windows in the hallway, and the room we had just explored faced the back. That meant the police car might have been outside for a couple of minutes now. I also noticed the skylight in the ceiling of Casey's room. It was broken, but the debris had all been moved to the corner of the room in a neat little pile. Then there was the blood. It was hard to tell what the odd stains all over Casey's carpet were in the first few seconds, but as my friends started to whisper obscenities at their notice of the police car outside, a few of their lights fell on the carpet. The reddish-brown stains horrified me, as did a few bones I saw scattered across the floor of the room. There were also some stains on the bed and the walls. I gave a little yelp, then followed my friends as we all ran toward the backyard. There was a knocking at the door as we all squeezed out of the little dog door, one by one. A few of my friends had the sense to turn off their flashlights and whispered to the others to do so as well. I was the last one to get his turn at the doggy door, since I was the first inside the room. As I poked my head into the yard, I saw my friends making for the fence to hop it again. Hop it right into the oleanders. I froze. I couldn't go in those bushes. Not after dark. Not after all that had happened. I ducked back inside. I don't think any of my friends noticed me stay behind. I ran for Casey's mother's room. There was a bed in there I could hide under. I ran through the hallway, shivering as I saw Casey's room at the end. I turned left into his mom's room, the room right next to his that faced the backyard. I was about to shut the door behind me when I noticed a beam of light hit the wall off to my right. I froze for a second, wondering why my friends had come back and turned on their flashlights. But then, the realization dawned on me, and I dove down beneath the bed before the cop's light had time to reach me. I peered out as the light went back and forth across the room. The officer was obviously trying to see if anyone was inside without breaking in. I stayed completely still, even after the light stopped shining into the room. I heard him knock on the back door, and then I heard some grunts of effort as I think he tried to squeeze himself in through the doggy door. Next, I heard a distorted noise like TV static. It was the officer's radio, but I was too far away from him to make out what was being said. I heard him reply, "No signs of forced entry, besides the doggy door being broken. I heard some noises from the backyard when I got here, but whoever it was ran before I spotted them. If they got in through the doggy door, it was probably just some kids messing around." More static. Then, "I'll come by tomorrow night to make sure they don't come back. They probably learned their lesson tonight, though." More static. "I'm on my way. Give me a second. I'm halfway through this doggy door." More grunts, and then no more noise. I saw the beam of light travel across the room. Then I faintly heard a car door slam. I stayed put, breathing hard. I decided I would wait a few minutes to make sure he was gone. Then, I would just walk out the front door. After waiting a while in the silence, I started to scoot out from under the bed. Then, I heard another sound. I froze, trying to determine where it had come from. Had the cop only feigned leaving to draw out whoever he suspected was hiding from him? I stayed still, focusing all my attention on listening. I heard the noise again, then again, and it seemed to be growing louder. When I heard it once more, it was clear where it was coming from. Something was on the roof, directly above my head. I slid back under the bed in a panic. The footsteps continued across the roof until they were no longer above me. Soon, I couldn't hear them anymore, but they had been heading towards Casey's room. I knew what was coming next, but I almost screamed as a soft thump from Casey's room signaled that something had dropped through the broken skylight. I covered my mouth with both hands. I could feel tears streaking down my face as I stared, wide-eyed, out from under the bed. I heard a door creak slightly, and then I heard the sound I had been dreading. Raspy, pained breathing. I shuddered uncontrollably as a pair of awful white feet with unnaturally long toes came into view, slapping their way down the hallway. It was muttering to itself, but I couldn't make out most of the words. I caught a few phrases.
"Awful children,"
it said.
"I home. First home. Second home."
It walked into the room across the hallway and slowly lowered itself flat on the floor. Its head peered around the room, and I could hear it sniffing. I was trembling. I tried my best to keep myself still, but to no avail. As my eyes had adjusted to the dim light, I could see it wore a torn black shirt and battered gym shorts, but these details were just cursory things. I was focused on its head, shifting back and forth, curtains of dark hair swinging as it surveyed the room. Eventually, it got up and turned back towards the hallway. Its feet slapped against the tiled floor as it made its way into the room I was hiding in. I gasped, despite my hands covering my mouth. I unwillingly took a sharp breath through my nose. The feet stopped moving instantly. It muttered again.
"Awful children, invading my home."
It said. In its voice, I heard the ghost of a smile.
"Not going to take my second home, like they took my first home."
The way it was speaking was sing-song, like it was reciting a nursery rhyme. It started to bend down. The murderous hands reached the carpet, hands stained with blood, hands I had seen clutch Casey's mouth. It began lowering itself to the floor. It was moving slow, almost comically slow. Dark hair came into view next, hanging down in such a way that I knew its face was coming down directly in front of mine. Then, a pale chin, followed by a wide, unmoving grin, teeth red and black. A slender nose, still sniffing for my scent. I whimpered as the eyes began sinking into view. Manic, wide, bloodshot. They stared directly into mine out of its oddly childlike face. I screamed. At that moment, light flashed in through the window. For though he was hideous, he was undoubtedly a man, froze, smile fading. He scurried backward, still on all fours, and leapt back into Casey's room. I seized my chance and raced out from under the bed. I ran down the hallway toward the front door and almost bowled over one of my friends. They had come back to find me after they realized I was missing after the cop had left. I pulled him toward the front door, unlocked it, and ran outside. I did not stop to explain where I had been or why I had screamed, though a group of my friends were asking as they ran with me, a few still filtering out from the backyard of the house. I did not stop until I had reached my front door. I turned then to look back at Casey's house and saw a dark shape dart back behind the shadow of the chimney. I assured my friends I was fine in a shaky, unstable voice. Then I ran inside, sprinted to my room, and slammed the door. I sank to the floor and cried.